Remember that game about a week and a half ago when the Kraken hosted the Avalanche just a couple games after beating them on the road, and then proceeded to lose to them 5-1 thanks to a third period where they gave up 3 goals and only got the 1 shot on goal, basically not showing up coming into that third period down 2-1. Well, if you do, then this game is basically the same exact thing, and if you missed that game, then the Kraken were kind enough to replay it for you. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken lose 5-1 to the Vancouver Canucks at home after having just beaten the Canucks not that long ago on the road in Vancouver. And of course, they managed to do it by not showing up in the third period, giving up 3 goals, and getting just 2 shots on goal themselves. Which I suppose is double what they got in that game against the Avalanche that I mentioned, but it's also just 1 more. Though I suppose at least this time both of those shots came from the offensive end, as opposed to in that Vancouver game, the lone shot came from the Kraken end of the ice, so... well, I mean, it's still not that much better. But before we get into this game, since it's going to be depressing from a Kraken standpoint anyway, and we've basically already seen this exact game play out against the Avalanche in pretty recent memory, I'm going to take a quick second here to plug something coming up on the channel, which I pretty much never do. It's the next live stream coming up on Thursday, and I've been historically bad at advertising these live streams more than basically a day in advance. However, I did want to advertise this one in particular because I am going to be trying something new with it for the first time here on the channel. And it's not something that's going to happen a whole ton going on into the future because, well, for the most part, the opportunity to do so just doesn't arise all that often. But I thought it would be fun to try something new and see how it goes. Now, as usual, I will be doing a watch-along style stream for the Kraken game in Toronto against the Maple Leafs, and that will be taking center stage. But also happening at the same time, or at least overlapping by an hour and a half to maybe 2 hours, depending on the length of the first game, the Seahawks are in Dallas against the Cowboys, who are basically the Maple Leafs of the NFL. Or I suppose you could look at it the other way too, where the Maple Leafs are the Cowboys of the NHL. Either way, it seemed like a perfect opportunity to try and stream both games. Now again, the Kraken game will take center stage. Whenever it's on, I'll be focusing on that one, but during commercial breaks or intermissions, I'll be trying to get the Seahawks game going as well, and I'll at least have it on a separate screen, so I'll give updates as that one goes along, even while the Kraken are playing. Again, I don't really know how it's going to go. It does seem like it could get chaotic trying to stream both games at the same time, but it seemed like a fun thing to try, and we'll see how it goes. So if you're available and want to tune in to see what's going on and the chaos that will probably ensue, especially during the overlap between the 2 games, I'd love to have you join. Again, as usual, like most of my streams, I'll be starting it roughly 15 minutes before the Kraken start their game, the first of the 2. That happening at 4 o'clock Pacific time, so I'll be starting the stream somewhere around 3:45 and then going through the Kraken game and the end of the Seahawks game that will inevitably go on past the end of the Kraken one. Anyway, to unfortunately get back to the game at hand against the Canucks, there is at least some good news for the Kraken coming into this game, that Andrei Burakovsky has started skating as part of his rehab. He's still going to be at least probably a week or 2 out, currently 4 weeks through his estimated 6 to 8 weeks of recovery time after the injury. Now, obviously, hopefully he won't have any setbacks like he did last season after that injury, and we will see him coming back here sometime in December. Either way, it was good to see him back out on ice before one of the Kraken practices, and we hope for the best going on here through the next couple of weeks, because clearly the Kraken could use all the help they can get. With that said, though, we might as well move on into this game against the Canucks and then through it as quickly as possible so we can move on with our lives and hopefully wish for better things for the Kraken to come. Although, even if they do win the next game, or even 2 for that matter, it isn't necessarily a sign that things are really improving for them, since they continue to be good and then bad and then good and then bad, and yeah, it's just an inconsistent mess to this point. And for that matter, it's going to take us until Tuesday to even have a chance to wash this game out of our mouths. So, yeah, here we go. We start off with the first period for the Kraken that honestly should have been a lot better for them than it ended up being, at least on the scoreboard, as they do end up outshooting the Canucks by the end of the period. I think something like 14-6 or maybe 14-8. Either way, the Kraken got the better of the Canucks when it came to offensive zone opportunities and obviously shots on goal. Although that is certainly helped out by the fact that the Kraken spent 8 minutes of this first period on the power play. That having been said, the first of those power plays, they basically spend that time on the kill, as they really just didn't show up to this game until about 6 minutes in, which includes the entirety of that first power play. A first power play, by the way, which they didn't get any shots on goal during, and allowed 2 shots on goal for the Canucks, and both of those were free breakaways. The second of which, while Decor did make a save on the first one, the second one ends up scoring. It's Teddy Bluger with the breakaway and goal here for the Canucks, shorthanded. Again, just about a minute after I think it was Dakota Joshua that had the first breakaway that Decor made the save on. This one for Bluger, it's just a puck that he steals off of Schultz, who tries to one-touch pass it backhand across the neutral zone, but since he's the last line of defense, that's probably not the best idea. He probably should have just taken that puck backwards with him and then allowed the Kraken to reset up. Instead, he tries to just slap it backhand through the middle of the neutral zone. It goes right to Bluger. Bluger skates in with it and beats Decord to give the Canucks the shorthanded goal and the 1-0 lead. Now from there, the Kraken did wake up the rest of this period. They spent 6 more minutes on the power play and honestly looked pretty good on the power play for those 6 minutes, but they aren't able to score on any of them. Even with all of that opportunity on the power play, including the last 4 minutes of it being a double minor against Tyler Myers, which Kraken fans were all too happy to see Myers in the penalty box for 4 minutes, that being a double minor for high sticking on Eberle, which he actually, on that same play, ended up catching, I think it was Miller, with the same high stick, so I guess a little friendly fire and then getting blood from Eberle. The Kraken get that double minor, still don't score on it. 14 shots on goal, Demko's up to the task, and we go to that first intermission with the Canucks up 1-0. Though, I suppose for what it's worth, in the power play that came not that long after the first power play that Kraken gave up that shorthanded goal on, and actually now that I think about it, both of these first 2 penalties against the Canucks, which were the single minors, did happen in plays that happened in the Kraken end of the ice. So for the Canucks, definitely not what you want to see, taking penalties in your offensive end. The Kraken, I guess that's just a sign of how their game started. They were letting the Canucks into their offensive end so much that they drew 2 penalties there and still ended up giving the Canucks a goal out of it. Now the Kraken do end up scoring on this second power play. It's Beniers that just winds up and shoots on that same play that he scored 2 of his goals so far this season. Unfortunately though, it's called back for offside, so that's how we end up with the end of this period being 1-0 Canucks instead of tied at 1. I suppose for the Kraken, they did at least manage to carry the momentum that they built through the second half of the first period into the start of the second period, and honestly, they really should have scored at least once, if not twice, through the first 7-ish minutes of this second period. They had all sorts of chaos created out in front of the net, lots of shots on goal, creating bounces and rebounds off of Demko. Demko was playing pretty well, but there was a couple of these rebounds that really should have ended up in the back of that net. Unfortunately, 2 of them, at least that I can think of, bounced over Kraken sticks or just rebounds that went just wide of Kraken players, crashing in off of odd man rushes and all sorts of different opportunities. Probably the most blatant of which was one where there was a rebound that Demko ended up outside the crease entirely, so it's a wide open net, and the rebound goes right through the slot, and McCann's standing right there for it, but the puck just takes a weird bounce over his stick and goes harmlessly through the rest of the offensive end. Demko's able to get back in net, and the Kraken don't get anything out of it. Anyway, all of that adds up to the Canucks getting definitely some pretty fortunate bounces in their end of the ice to start the second period, and by the time we're halfway through the game, the Kraken are outshooting the Canucks at least 2-1 ratio-wise shots on goal, but they're still down 1-0. And then as we cross over into the back half of the second period and the back half of the game, the Canucks start to turn momentum back in their favor, getting the puck towards the Kraken end of the ice, and carrying with it that luck that they had at their end, as it's once again bounces going their way in the Kraken end of the ice, a play that just sees the puck bouncing all around the slot between all sorts of sticks, a couple of saves by Decord. There's more Kraken players in the slot than there are Canucks, so at least from a defensive standpoint, not defended terribly by at least position of players. Unfortunately, the puck just seems to only want to find Canuck sticks, and eventually it's a shot on goal from the high slot that is saved by Decord, but the rebound goes right out to Dakota Joshua, and he buries it to give the Canucks the 2-0 lead. And not long after, Vancouver would get their first power play of the game with a chance to go up 3-0. The Kraken would kill that off, and then right back the other way at 5-on-5. Finally, they would find the back of the net as Cartier fires off a shot that might have gotten deflected by a Canuck out in front of Demko. Either way, it finds its way past Demko on the short side through a pretty tight window and into the side of the net to give the Kraken their first goal of the game. Cartier his 3rd of the season, and they're still back to within 1, even with everything that's happened to this point. And then we get to the third period, which, in the first half of the third period, basically nothing happens whatsoever. The Kraken probably should have been pressing a little bit more offensively, considering they're down 1 at this point, but they get no shots on goal. Vancouver might have gotten 1 or 2 at the very beginning, but basically nothing happens through this first half of the third. And then we cross over to the second half. Vancouver gets into the offensive end, and it's a moving screen of Schultz and one of the Canucks players crossing in front of the face of Decord that allows a shot from Lafferty to get right past Decord clean into the net from above the face-off circle, and it's now 3-1, which at this point, given how the Kraken had played so far in the third period, pretty much seemed like the end of the game. Unfortunately, though, the Kraken would not be let off that easy, as a couple of minutes later, on their second given up 2-on-1 rush towards Decord in just about 30 seconds, although Decord does make the first save on the first 2-on-1 rush, that second 2-on-1 rush comes in, and although these are definitely not the type of rush chances you want to be giving up, Schultz does at least take away the pass, and at that point it's up to Decord to make the save on what is now a free shot. Again, definitely not the ideal situation to be putting your goaltender in from a defensive perspective, but that is how you play this. Decord isn't able to make the save on the Hoglander shot, and the Canucks go up 4-1. Which is also frustrating because Hoglander, I'm pretty sure, was the one that laid a hit on Tanev in the first period that knocked out Tanev for the rest of this game. It was a clean hit, and obviously there was no response from the Kraken, which is kind of what we expect now. But since I forgot to mention it in the first period, yeah, Tanev does get knocked out of this game. He tried to come back early on in the third, but wasn't able to, so we'll see where that leaves the Kraken if he's able to get back in this 3-day break that they have. But once again, here we are with the Kraken, almost 15 minutes of the way through a third period, and just like that game against the Avalanche, although they came into it having played a pretty tight game against a good opponent, down 1 goal, they haven't pressed whatsoever offensively, have 0 shots on goal, and have allowed 2 to their opponent to get down to that 4-1 score. And to make things even more like that game against the Avalanche, they gave up a power play to the Canucks, which they kill off, but almost immediately as the power play ends, and the 5th Kraken player comes out on the ice, a crossing pass in front of Decord's face gets to a guy left wide open on the back door, and it's now 5-1, so we got to that same score that we saw in the game against the Avalanche. Eventually in this third period, the Kraken do end up getting 2 shots on goal, both from around the face-off circle, so it was, I guess in that way, a slightly better offensive effort than we saw in that game against the Avalanche, where the only shot on goal came from Larson by the Kraken face-off circles in the defensive end. Again, that's very, very, very faint praise considering how the rest of this period went, and for what that's worth, the Kraken also had 2 players exit this game early. Cartier had an interference which led to that power play, and then said some choice things that got him kicked out of the game for misconduct. And just a couple minutes later, Gord had a fight with Teddy Bluger, so they both end up exiting the game early as well. A fight that Gord definitely did win against Bluger, so I suppose for what that's worth, it was at least something for the Kraken fans to watch and enjoy during this third period that was otherwise terrible. But regardless, though, it clearly doesn't count for anything in the standings, and at the end of the day, the Kraken get absolutely manhandled in the third period that they didn't bother showing up for, and give away 2 points in the standings, or at least 1 anyway, as they should have given themselves a chance to at least force overtime, down 1 coming into the third. As Hextall said after the game then, and we've seen this play out time and time again already through 21 games of this season, you can't play just part of 60 minutes in the NHL and expect to have a chance to win. And sure enough, once again, the Kraken just don't show up for an entire period of the game. Once again, it's the third period, which is probably the worst one to not show up for, and they end up losing as a result and do it in big blowout fashion at home. Now having lost 4-1, I think 3 times at home, and 5-1 twice. I suppose then it's probably good news for the Kraken that they have 3 days off to at least try and get some practices in and figure out what in the heck is going wrong, and then they get 2 road games, so, well, since they play well on the road, or at least decently on the road, they at least have a chance to win those 2 games. Other than that, I really don't know what more is worth saying about this game. Again, it's pretty much all the same things that I said after that game against the Avalanche, where the Kraken lost that one 5-1 after a terrible third period that they just really didn't even bother showing up in. So, yeah, same stuff there. The Kraken once again play another good 2 periods against a good team, stay in the game, give themselves every chance to win in the third, and then just don't show up for that third period. As far as 3 stars are concerned, I don't really think it's worth going into 3 stars. I don't know who played well enough in this game for the Kraken to be worthy of a star. I guess Cartier did have the goal and at least showed some fight towards the end of the game, even if he got himself kicked out. But at this point, I really don't feel like giving out participation trophies to Kraken players, so I'm going with no stars in this game. But if you disagree with me and think there really were Kraken players worth giving stars to in this game, then you can help decide Kraken stars after each and every one of the Kraken games by helping support this channel a little bit more than you already are by watching this video to this point through the link to Patreon down below. But so far as Patreon is concerned, they seem to agree with me, considering the only 2 comments that I've gotten on this game are boo with a sad face emoji and sad face. I guess it isn't an emoji, it's just the text version, but either way, same idea. Anyway, at this point, I think we're all pretty much ready to move on from this game, put it in the past, and at least hope for better things to come. Whether or not better things actually end up coming, we'll just have to wait and see. At least the next game for the Kraken, even if it is in 3 days, which we now have to sit on this game for 3 more days, it might be a good thing for the Kraken that they have 3 days rest. They've played the most games in the NHL, so maybe there's some fatigue built in here, but I don't know that that's an excuse considering they've had this issue with not showing up in the third or second period throughout all 21 games this season. Anyway, their next game is against a terrible Blackhawks team outside of Connor Bedard, so they very well should win that game on the road, especially after 3 days rest. And from a fan perspective, it'll also be fun to see old friend Ryan Donato on that team too. Until then, though, let me know what you think of this game down in the comment section below, who your 3 stars would be if you had any. And, well, yeah, until next time, and again, reminder that stream is on Thursday if you're able to join. Stay safe out there, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.